tēnā koutou katoa. Konnichiwa, talofa, and unmurabak to those who have just completed Ramadan. Distinguished guests, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Honourable Megan Woods, Honourable Kris Faafoi, and Honourable Kris Hipkins. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Rob Purdy, and I'm the Country Manager of Fujitsu. And it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern on the much anticipated 2022 budget. It's been just over 2 years since digital took the driving force in the way that we work. Minister David Clark said in his draft Digital Technologies Industry Transformation Plan that despite the ongoing headwinds, the digital technology sector is thriving. And I think it's an outstanding achievement that can be put down to the commitment of Kiwis to be agile, to adapt and overcome. And if anything the pandemic has taught us, connecting people with tools and technology is now vital. Not only for our businesses, but our staff, our customers, our citizens and our economy. But now we're in the thick of it, the question remains, how do we keep at pace and how do we support our country to thrive? Aotearoa's IT industry has the opportunity and the responsibility to enable easy access and the use of technology to communities and businesses. Digital is the pathway to tomorrow's jobs, the answer to connecting Aotearoa to a brighter future. We're now almost midway through 2022 and many headwinds still remain. I believe global crisis requires global solutions. Through the power of innovation, New Zealand has the potential to become a world-leading digital nation built on trust. And at Fujitsu, our purpose is to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. At the beginning of the pandemic, like most of yours, we underwent a big shift, enabling 120,000 people to work from home globally. Not a small undertaking. And between February and November 2020, we saw nearly an increase of 5,000% of online video calls and Teams meetings. Really crazy growth. And over the last 2 years, Fujitsu has improved our capability to better serve Aotearoa's communities and businesses and has gone under significant transformation. We've better positioned ourselves by becoming an industry-aligned organisation. Fujitsu has appointed heads of industry and heads of digital transformation who are responsible for delivering the best global IP that Fujitsu has locally. And we're also continuing to expand in the ANZ region, and in April 2021 we acquired data analytics and AI company Versa. Versa underpins the real-time business decisions and the data that we need to run our businesses. It was the first of 2 acquisitions in ANZ in the last year, and it exemplifies our global strategy to invest locally to better serve our customers. In saying this, innovation and technology is only good at the people and culture behind it. We as business leaders need the relevant capabilities and skills to engage our staff and help build a sustainable future. Sustainability is a critical focus area as we see it as our future success. At the beginning of last year, the ANZ business created an Office of Purpose led by Nicole Forrester, who is a member on the executive leadership team with myself. The Office of Purpose is not only our lifeblood for sustainability initiatives, but it also drives our social impact, diversity and inclusion transformation. Guided by our principles of waiwata, tiakiatanga and ahuroa, we've developed a business-wide purpose strategy which includes our Māori and Pacific Peoples Inclusion Plan. We've also introduced volunteering with purpose and our sustainability goals. The Office of Purpose has also led initiatives such as working with Mind the Gap, engagement with the Sustainable Business Council, and of course working with Business New Zealand. Other key areas Fujitsu New Zealand has been focused on are our decade-long pro bono partnership with the Young Enterprise Scheme, the support we provide to CreateOps and YTech that help connect female, Māori and Pacific high school students with the technology sector, Tuputoa, who we're working with to bring Māori and Pacific interns into the IT sector later this year. And I'm proud to announce today we've launched a partnership with the Graham Dingle Foundation, a leading child and youth development charity empowering young people to succeed. For as our tamariki that is the future of this country. Diversity, equality and inclusion are integral for us all to collectively achieve our purpose. By creating a supportive and inclusive culture where people with different talents and capabilities can be themselves, we as business leaders can create meaningful solutions that transform this country. Amidst of all of this change, we are very attuned to the fact that we will not return to the way we worked. Digital shifts is one of our 7 key global priorities. We're not only making this transformational shift ourselves, but we are supporting customers and leading them through this rapidly changing landscape. The future of work is upon us. Kiwi resilience has been at the core towards reconnecting with the world as a clear shift from striving to thriving through the pandemic. We are committed to enabling, empowering and innovation that reconnects New Zealand on its ongoing journey towards a digital future. As author Vivian Green explained, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning how to dance in the rain. Thank you very much. My name is Rob Purdy. Thank you for listening to me. It's my pleasure to welcome Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern.
Well, kia ora koutou katoa, and thank you to Business New Zealand and Fujitsu for hosting us here today. And I'm grateful to be joined by Minister Kris Faafoi and also Minister Kris Hipkins, Ministers for Education and Immigration, but also what I would like to call my backup ministers today should my internet connection fail me. Can I also thank you for being so agile in the arrangements for our lunch event? I had, of course, hoped to be with you in person, but instead I'm having the very 2022 experience of isolating with my family. I apologise in advance for any unexpected visitors. I've decided that Zoom and media calls have an almost uncontrollable magnetism for small children. I wanted to kick off today with a couple of reflections from further afield than these 4 walls. Last month, I was privileged to lead a delegation into Singapore and Japan. While there were many excellent outcomes for New Zealand from both visits, it also served as a reminder to me of the shared experience we are all having as nations right now. There was one visit in particular that served as a visual reminder. Singapore has been a critical partner through COVID as we address supply chain issues. In fact, we agreed to bring together an ongoing task force of sorts on this issue going forward. As part of this agreement, I visited the port in Singapore, a place where 1/5 of our exports pass through. As you can imagine, it was a logistical sight to behold. While the CEO talked us through the port's 30-year plan, I asked him what COVID impacts he was continuing to see in the here and now. He paused briefly before saying, "You won't find a major port that isn't impacted even now." He then pointed out to the scene in front of him and remarked that he never liked to see shipping containers at his port stacked more than 5 high, because that tells him there is congestion in the network. As I looked out, I saw a sea of stacked shipping containers. For me, that highlighted 2 things. There is still a pandemic in the world, and it continues to have an impact in many ways. And at the same time, the war in Ukraine is compounding the global shocks we are seeing reverberate through our economies. I've been on bilateral calls just this week with European leaders to ensure our free trade agreement remains high on their agenda, but also to get their take on the current status of Putin's war. These calls in recent weeks have included the Prime Ministers of the Netherlands, Spain and Sweden. My conversation with Spain's leader, Pedro Sanchez, in particular lingers. He'd been in Kiev only weeks prior and saw in real time what the war means for Ukrainian citizens, but also what it means for the region. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has resulted in the destabilization of Europe in a way that has reverberated around the world. It is having an impact on the sense of security we feel as a global community, as well as contributing to an already difficult inflationary cycle that on the individual level brings costs of living to the fore. There are heavy clouds over the world at the moment, and I know that New Zealanders feel the weight of it all right now too. But the reason I outline this is because while there is no question that currently it is tough and there are challenges to confront, I've been reflecting on the perspective provided by visiting and talking with counterparts overseas. There is cause for New Zealand in particular to feel optimistic because we are well positioned to accelerate our economic recovery. We've come through the COVID shock better than almost anywhere in the developed world. In fact, our economy is one of the strongest in the world. We have record low unemployment of 3.2%, and economic activity is up on what it was pre-COVID. Our debt levels are half of what Australia's are. Annual GDP growth is 5.6% over the past year, compared to 1.2% in 2009 after the global financial crisis. Now, none of these results were an accident or even a coincidence. They're a result of deliberate decisions we have made as a government and the efforts of the whole team of 5 million. It's due to the investments we have made in training and supporting New Zealanders into work, while protecting people and livelihoods from the worst effects of the pandemic. The wage subsidy, which supported nearly half of all Kiwi workers, the resurgent support, the business loan scheme. It's due to the apprenticeship boost, which has supported 43,000 apprentices despite tough times, and job support schemes like the flexi wage that have financially supported employers to take on workers who might otherwise be on government support. And it's in part too, because we've taken the hard edges of the immediate cost of living crisis, lifting the incomes of 60% of New Zealand families on April 1 and cutting fuel excise for a period. And now, it's because we are casting our eyes to the future as we continue our reconnecting plan, welcoming back our Australian neighbours and tourists from around 60 visa waiver countries earlier than expected, because we controlled COVID and it was safe to do so, as well as bringing in over 29,000 workers to do the jobs that couldn't wait while our borders were closed. It is a plan that has worked, but there is a lot more to do. Next Thursday, the Minister of Finance will release Budget 2022. It's a front row event that I'm hoping I will get to check in my ticket on. A budget that takes the opportunity to make investments that secure our future whilst also responding to the most pressing issues in front of us, because we must do both. In my conversations over the past few months with both international partners and businesses here at home, the biggest economic constraint we faced, but also the biggest economic solution, is workforce, getting the skills right for the right job. This was the case after the global financial crisis too, but back then a different tack was taken. Business support was withdrawn, and those still learning their trades were, out of necessity, often let go. An infrastructure deficit ensued. Instead of continuing to invest in and train New Zealanders who build our homes, upgrade our infrastructure, work in our hospitals, and help us innovate to meet long-term challenges like climate change, our economy reverted to seeking workers from offshore. This often resulted in labour that drove down wages and productivity across the country, whilst also depriving migrant workers of the experience they deserved here in New Zealand. It was a situation that was letting everyone down, and the numbers tell that story. Between 2012 and 2019, the number of migrant workers employed in New Zealand increased by approximately 144%. At the same time, the New Zealand workforce increased by about 15%. New Zealand has been shown to have the heaviest reliance on temporary migrant labour in the OECD. Now, I want to be clear, migrants shape our society for the better in so many ways. They make enormous sacrifices and massive contributions to New Zealand. It's one of the reasons why, as a government, we recently provided 192,000 migrants a streamlined pathway to residence through the 2021 resident visa. But we have a duty of care to everyone, that as we reopen our borders, we do so with a plan in place that means we learn the lessons of the past. The aftermath of the GFC cannot be repeated. It was never tolerable for us that unemployment at the height of COVID would reach, for example, 10% as projected by Treasury, and 3.2% today is testament to our actions to ensure that didn't happen. For March after the GFC, unemployment hit 14%. Today, it's 6.3%. And this has again been down to those deliberate decisions, including investment in our people. One of the biggest successes of the government in the past 2 years is the 190,000 people that our investments in trades training, including apprentices, have helped to deliver. And I do want to particularly acknowledge Minister Hipkins and the role he's played in that. On Monday, we announced a further extension to the apprenticeship boost to continue fueling that success, ensuring businesses are supported to grow as much talent in New Zealand as possible. To meet our long-term challenges, such as building the homes and the infrastructure our country needs to grow, and ensuring every New Zealander can get a tradie when they need one. But still, COVID has left us with a skills shortage in New Zealand, and businesses need to be able to access the labour they need and look after the people they hire year-round in a sustainable, easy, faster way than the current immigration policies allow. That is why today I can announce a package to speed up our economic recovery while setting us up to address long-term challenges. First, today I can announce that New Zealand fully reopens to the world by July 31, completing our reconnecting work 2 months ahead of schedule. In a few days' time, on the 16th of May, visitor visas from the Pacific Islands will open online. Then from the 4th of July, all work visa categories, including the new accredited employer work visa, will open for applications. A few weeks later, on the 31st of July, student and visitor visas from the rest of the world will reopen and international education returns. Cruise ships will return too, with the maritime border reopening on the 31st of July. Now that we have dates, I understand that the next question, naturally, is whether all of our border settings, including pre-departure testing, will remain in place. As we begin the consultation on our variant plan, it's clear that monitoring at the border will continue to be important, but we will be able to change up the role that pre-departure testing has played. Now, while we're still working through this transition, it's fair to say we are confident pre-departure testing will be removed by the time we come to the final phase of our reopening in July. Overall, these announcements mean we have brought forward our complete reopening by 2 months, and we're giving enough time for our cruise ship industry to prepare for the next big season starting in October. I know this will be welcome news, and it's a phase we are ready for. Second, today I can announce a rebalance of our immigration settings that will simplify and speed up access to skilled workers in hard-to-fill roles while creating new pathways to residence. Central to this rebalance is the new accredited employer work visa. Now, the streamlined accredited employer work visa process combines 6 visas into one and uses a simple 3-step process: an employer check, a job check, and a worker check. For an employer, this will cut the processing time from up to 80 days pre-COVID to less than 30. The process for becoming accredited opens on the 23rd of May, in 12 days' time. The accredited employer work visa comes with a medium wage requirement, which will be $27.76 by July. Not only does this bring the added benefit of lifting wages, conditions, and productivity for everyone working in these jobs, including New Zealanders, it will also help us better protect those who come here to help us. And we're ready to kick off in just 8 weeks, with processing of these visas beginning from the 4th of July. Now, the second significant change is the introduction of what will be known as a green list for highly skilled and in-demand workers. For those professions on this list, they will have a faster and simpler pathway to residence. The green list will include globally in-demand roles such as health professionals, GPs, nurses, midwives, tradespeople and engineers, including surveyors, project builders, geotechnical and environmental engineers, plumbers, electricians, teachers who are ECE registered or secondary with specialisation, dairy farm managers, and tech sector specialists, just to name a few. From the outset, this list will cover 56 roles on a straight to residence pathway and 29 roles on a 2-year work to residence pathway. Now, simply put, this means a doctor or a structural engineer will be able to apply for residence as soon as they decide they want to come to New Zealand and have a job offer. And a nurse or an electrician will be eligible to apply for residence after 2 years working here on an accredited employer work visa. Workers earning twice the minimum wage for an accredited employer will also be able to apply for residence after 2 years. The jobs on the green list will be reviewed after 12 months initially, then every 3 years after that. Now, the introduction of the green list is significant and its purpose is simple. There are some areas where we know we have skills gaps, We want to make recruitment as easy as possible. Giving certainty around the ability for people to stay if they bring these skills in has been a missing piece in our immigration system. Now, alongside these changes, we will have transition arrangements in place. For those sectors where it will take time to get wages to meet the median wage, we're introducing sector-specific agreements to allow sectors to continue accessing some migrant workers who are paid below the median wage. These agreements give time for those sectors to improve working conditions and put significant efforts into retaining, training and upskilling New Zealanders. In acknowledgement of the tough time in particular for tourism and hospitality, and to support their rebuild, we're providing a transitional measure for many of the roles in those sectors by exempting them from the median wage and instead including a lower wage requirement for the time being, while they recover from the effects of the pandemic. This recognises that these sectors rely heavily on working holiday visas and students, whose numbers will take time to regrow. In addition, we'll extend visas for most temporary work visa holders in New Zealand to ensure skilled workers already here can remain as we accelerate our recovery. This will cover about 20,000 workers and their families, many who will also receive open work rights, so they'll be able to work for any employer. Finally, there will also continue to be the additional schemes that allow people to come to New Zealand to work, including through working holiday schemes, student visas, and the RSE scheme. These workers are crucial to our workforce and will help bolster the industries that will be in demand during our COVID recovery. Now, there's a lot of information in these announcements, and I want to give Minister Faafoi a chance to speak in a bit more detail before we open up for questions. But before I do, a couple of closing thoughts. Today represents a significant milestone in our recovery plan. This package is designed to address the urgent skill shortages created by COVID, while also putting our immigration settings on a better and more sustainable footing. Employers will have greater access to skilled workers to address workforce needs, and with our new opening dates, families and friends can reunite and international students can return to New Zealand. And the return of international visitors will provide a much needed boost to our tourism and events sector. The July reopening dates will also provide confidence to airlines planning a return to New Zealand routes for the peak season and in the wider tourism sector recovery. But overall, we had an opportunity here to get smart about immigration, and we've taken it to speed up our recovery. I'm now, though, delighted to hand over to Minister Faafoi to lay out further details.
Thanks, Prime Minister. There's a lot of really positive messages in there, and I'm sure that the business community will be very much welcoming anything that's going to help deal with those staff shortages. It's right across the board. So without further ado, and he doesn't really need any introduction, we're going to go to Minister Faafoi to speak. He's got a bit more detail, I understand, and then we'll do questions for both of them afterwards. So welcome.
Kia ora, Catherine. Can I also acknowledge the Prime Minister and my colleague, the Honourable Kris Hipkins, who is here today. Can I thank you all for hosting us today, especially to Business New Zealand, and acknowledge Kirk, who is recuperating at home. Can I thank you for the chance for us to share the outcomes of our immigration rebalance, as the Prime Minister said. Migrants have always and will always play an important role in New Zealand society. They make a valuable and significant contribution to our economy and enrich our communities. We acknowledge the important contribution of migrants through the creation of the 2021 resident visa, which will provide a streamlined residence pathway, as the Prime Minister said, for more than 190,000 migrants. But also, as the Prime Minister mentioned, the border closure presented us with a unique opportunity to consider how our previous immigration settings were contributing to our long-term and social economic goals. As we reconnect with the world and progress New Zealand's economic recovery from COVID, we want to ensure we have an immigration system in place that supports this government's plan for a higher productivity, higher wage economy. And the immigration rebalance will make it easier to attract and hire skilled migrants, while supporting some sectors to transition away from their reliance on lower paid migrants, which COVID-19 has shown is not a sustainable business model. It will help lift working conditions for everyone, improve career pathways for New Zealanders, and encourage businesses to focus on increasing productivity and resilience as part of our plans for economic recovery out of the pandemic. As the PM mentioned, on the 4th of July, applications open for the new accredited employer work visa alongside all other work visas. The accredited employer work visa will result in a simplified system for both employers and workers by reducing the number of visa categories from 6 to 1. It is designed to support a future economy that is less reliant on lower paid migrant workers, better addresses productivity, meets skills and infrastructure challenges, and increases the overall skill level of migrants coming to New Zealand. As part of that rebalance, and reinforcing the point that the Prime Minister has made, employers will be able to hire migrants on the accredited employer work visa for roles paying at least the minimum wage of $27.76 an hour, unless an occupation is exempted, and I'll touch more on this in a moment. We expect this change to impact about a quarter of migrant workers based on previous income information. It's important to emphasise that employers will still be able to hire migrants with open work rights, such as working holiday makers, students and existing work visa holders for jobs below the median wage. They can also hire those who soon will become residents thanks to the 2021 resident visa. From the 4th of July, as the PM mentioned, a green list which will make it easier for employers to hire and attract migrants for high school hard to fill jobs will be in place. This will provide guaranteed residence pathways with a simplified application process for these workers. There are a number of occupations on the green list from across the health, construction and infrastructure, engineering, trades, agriculture and ICT sectors. The green list roles will be prioritised for processing and generally won't need to be advertised. The green list is about making it easier to attract globally in-demand workers who have a clear pathway to residence, but it is not the only pathway to residence available. Other migrants will still have a pathway to residence through the skilled migrant category once it reopens, and that will happen soon after the resident visa application window closes in July. From September, there will be 2 streamlined pathways to residence for migrants working in jobs on the green list, plus those who are paid twice the median wage will also have a pathway to residence. The first fast-tracked pathway to residence, which will be available to some workers immediately after receiving their visa. This fast-track residence pathway will benefit migrants and their employers in the construction, tech, science and health sectors, such as construction project managers, telecommunications engineers, environmental research scientists, vets and general practitioners, just to name a few. The second is a work to residence pathway, which will require migrants to work in a job for 2 years before they become eligible for residence. The 2-year work to residence pathway will be available to migrants working in certain roles in the health and education sectors and some trades, such as occupational therapists, secondary school teachers with specialisations such as science and maths, early childhood teachers and registered plumbers. To support certain sectors and employers to adjust to these new immigration settings, we have or will put in place a number of transitional measures such as sector agreements and temporary exemptions to the median wage threshold and extensions to visas for those already on shore. New sector agreements will be put in place for the care, construction and infrastructure, meat processing, seafood, seasonal snow and adventure tourism sectors to provide access to migrants paid below the median wage. In some cases, these sector agreements will be in place temporarily while the sectors transition away from an over-reliance on migrant labour. There is some work to come to finalise the settings for these sectors before the sector agreements will be in place. However, we have ensured that there are lower wage thresholds provided in the meantime for the care, seafood and construction sectors until those agreements are in place. More detail on these lower wage thresholds will be provided to the sectors following this announcement. There will also be a phasing in of the median wage threshold for most tourism and hospitality roles in recognition that it will take time for the numbers of open work rights holders in New Zealand to recover after our borders have opened. These roles will be provided a lower wage threshold of $25 per hour until April 2023. Each of these sectors will be provided limited exceptions to the median wage requirement in exchange for ongoing improvements, and the length of these exceptions will be different for each sector. This will allow those sectors which have traditionally relied on lower paid migrants time to time to improve working conditions, and put a significant amount of effort into retaining, training and upskilling New Zealanders or other residents as they transition away from this reliance. Eventually, we have envisioned that most of these sectors will only have access to migrant workers to fill roles paying at least the median wage, just like other employers. But we know that for these sectors, it will take time, and we are balancing the need for change with their wider workforce issues and impacts. For example, we do have an ageing population and need to ensure that our population grows our workforce capacity to care for those older people, to make sure that that is done. To support employers to transition to these new work visa settings, we are also extending all work-to-resident visas expiring before the 31st of December for 6 months from the date of expiry, and are granting open work visas to all onshore essential skills, post-study work and partner of New Zealand work visas expiring before the 31st of December, which will expire 2 years after their current visa expiry date. And in English, that means we're extending their visas by 2 years. This will also allow employers to retain their onshore workforce while they adjust to these new settings. And these extensions will also apply to partners and dependents on visas connected to the main visa holder. The changes that we are announcing and making today will make it easier to fill genuine skill gaps where New Zealanders can't be found. For highly skilled workers in a global shortage, it will ensure New Zealand is an attractive destination with fast-track pathways to residence and simplified application processes. These new settings will encourage employers to offer competitive wages and consider hiring more New Zealanders and train them, and work together as sectors to showcase employment opportunities and career pathways. And this will help build businesses' resilience and productivity. We know that these things can't be achieved, though, by immigration settings alone. The changes that we've announced today will be supported by sector-specific work underway, such as the development of industry transformation plans for agri-tech, tourism, digital technologies, food and beverage, advanced manufacturing, forestry and wood processing, as well as construction and tourism. We've also announced funding for apprenticeship boosts earlier this week, which is extended to the end of 2023, supporting 38,000 apprentices. In the coming months, we will make further announcements about the likes of immigration settings for the skilled migrant category and also investor visas, which will align our strategy to improve skills, productivity and resilience for our economy. Again, can I thank you for hosting us here this afternoon. I understand with the Prime Minister remote, we've now got an opportunity for myself and Minister Hipkins to answer any questions that the floor may have. Thank you. I'll just stay here.
Thank you, and thank you to you both. And look, you'll all be thinking of your questions, so please do that. We've got a couple of roving mics, and I guess I'll kick off as you have to do when you're emceeing something. So, look, we are in a global competition for talent. A lot of countries have thrown out the welcome mat and signalled that really clearly. What do you need from the business community to help get the message out to the rest of the world that we're open for business? What can the business community do to help?
Look, I think obviously today's announcement, I see the Prime Minister still here. I'll happily let her answer some of the questions if she wants to.
You go first, Minister Faafoi. I'll jump in at the end.
I appreciate the support, Prime Minister. Look, I think today's announcements around the border opening and the pathways to residence help in terms of products, immigration products that can help attract people here. I think making sure that we have certainty about the skills, the visas in the first place, but also the certainty about residency and long-term certainty here in New Zealand for those occupations on the green list, but also for some of those extremely skilled work around the 2 times median wage. Says that you can get a visa, the border is open, you can get a visa because the AEWV is a relatively simple tool. But also if you're very highly skilled, you've almost certainly got a pathway to residence here in New Zealand. And I think the last couple of years, globally, a lot of people have kind of thought about what their future might look like. And I think if we give them certainty about being able to come here, settle here, that is certainly something that I think businesses can say, that if we bring you here, you can stay here.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Prime Minister.
Yeah, if I could just add, I think that certainty factor is really crucial. And one of the things we heard You know, in recent months, and particularly when we made that decision to give certainty to those workers who were here, from employers, it was that they were having conversations with their workforce who were saying, look, we just don't know what's going to happen, and so that's why we're casting our eye around. So that's why that green list, I think, has that added advantage of giving that certainty right from the outset. The second point I would make is that we've looked at perhaps our competitors in the space of skilled workers, the likes of Canada, UK and Australia, to assess that we have a bit of advantage in the field, as it were, in the way that we've designed these settings. And I think we are maintaining some close proximity and some advantage so as not to create a situation where they may have one up on us and out in that what is a quite competitive field for skilled workers. And the third point I would make is that we will do our part. All of the trade delegations I've been leading, we've been making a very specific point of doing domestic-focused media to talk about the fact that our borders are open, to promote, for instance, the working holiday visa where it's relevant in those areas. And we likewise will continue to do so, pointing out that our borders are open now for those skilled workers too.
Great, thank you. Right, how about someone from the audience? Am I seeing any hands? Everyone gets really shy in a big group. No, we have a question down here. So just in the middle there, thanks.
Hi, my question is for the Prime Minister. My question is about intergenerational fairness. Are you concerned that the cost of the big build-up in government debt from all the borrowing with the government will have to be repaid by young New Zealanders, and do you think that this is fair?
I just want to, Max is our Prime Minister, John Key's son.
Well, look, I'm actually missing question time today, but I feel like I'm not getting too dissimilar a question here in the room. Look, the first thing I would point out is that actually relative to other countries, New Zealand's debt is low. You already heard me talk about the fact that our debt is half that of Australia, and I almost feel often unkind reflecting our debt levels relative to GDP in contrast to the likes of the UK and the United States, who sit closer to 80 to 100% of GDP, whereas ours, depending on the measure, sits as low as 20 and 30%, depending on how you measure. So that's our starting point. Our levels of debt are low. My second point would be the levels of debt that we have taken on relative to GDP and where we sit now is somewhat akin to where those increases that you saw in the aftermath of the GFC when Prime Minister Key was in the role. So, and many would argue that in fact the economic crisis we've experienced through COVID has been worse. We do have our eye to the future though, as we must. And you will have seen from, I hope, from the fiscal rules that Minister Robertson recently released, those two goals, those two settings, which says on the one hand our surplus levels that we will be working to maintain over an economic cycle, over a period at 0 to 2%, alongside the new debt ceilings, will very much ensure that where we are taking on debt, that it is focused on infrastructure and meeting those long-term needs. And so in tandem, those ensure that essentially New Zealand will live within its means while making the long-term investments that I know many in this room have been calling on political parties to make, so that we stop working in 3-year cycles and make decisions and investments that will serve us in good stead for future generations. Currently, we have a cycle that postpones those decisions, and Auckland and New Zealand in particular are paying for it.
Thank you. I experienced that from the airport into the city today, actually. More questions? I want to give people a chance. Okay, well, I've got one, handily. So this sounds like quite a big job for Immigration New Zealand, and the question is, do they have the resources to process these visas?
Yes, they do. We did recently shut down some offshore offices, but we have hired about 230 extra staff, and we'll continue to hire extra staff to make sure we can the process. We've got quite a busy dance sheet at the moment. We're obviously still processing the 2021 residency visa. There's also a new immigration online platform which has come on board, which we use for the second phase of the resident visa. What we want to make sure is that that is rolled out, so people will see a smarter and simpler immigration system. It will allow us to be dynamic in how we respond to demand from different visas, and I'm relatively confident, and we'll keep a very close eye on making sure that, as well as getting the 2021 resident visa done in a timeframe that we are happy with, that the opening of the borders will be able to make sure that we can process visitor visas as well as the new accredited employer work visas as well. There's a question at the back here, sorry.
Oh, great. Yep, question over the back.
Kia ora, my name is Sarah McBride. Greetings, Jacinda. I represent the commercial cleaning industry. I work for BSC. When you're talking about these new immigration changes, you mention employer-employee working relationship, but there isn't mention of business owners. Within our industry, we have some franchising in New Zealand is not regulated, and within our industry, we've seen many immigrants taken advantage of and working below minimum wage through the franchise business model. Within these changes that are happening at immigration, can you explain to us how they will be protected when they don't technically come under their employee umbrella? Thank you.
So one of the key parts of the AEWV system is that all employers will have to be accredited. In the past, as you say, some in the franchise sector have taken the opportunity to exploit some workers, and that's been a risk in the immigration system. You'll see, and we've had discussions with the franchise sector advocates, that when we go through the accreditation process with those particular types of employees, that they'll get some extra special attention, because the accreditation system for employees makes sure that they are fit in proper organisations to be able to hire migrants. So they'll have a bespoke process for accreditation to make sure that they will look after their workers, and if they err, then their accreditation can be taken off them.
Yeah, Greg down the bottom here. Oh, actually, there's a mic over there, so can we go there and then Greg next? Thanks.
Andrew Woodward, congratulations for opening up the borders. If I look to the educational sector and some of the other sectors you've opened up on, one of the big things is we will be competing with the world for students, for skilled workers. How is the government anticipating communicating and selling this message around the world?
I'll just get Minister Hipkins to come to the podium.
We were just having this conversation yesterday around around Minister Hipkins' plan, so an opportunity to share it and make his trip to Auckland that much more worthwhile.
Tomorrow morning we'll be launching here in Auckland the revised or refreshed international education strategy, and alongside that re-engagement with the World Plan. This is something that we've had a lot of time to think about whilst the border has been closed, and we know that actually there's some real built-up demand there, there's some real energy and enthusiasm, and we want to get out there and reconnect with the world as quickly as we can. So I'll set out some travel for me as well tomorrow when I launch that as well, because we want to get out and lead those delegations around the world to really liven up those international education connections, really send the message New Zealand is now open for business. We do want to welcome back international students. We have a plan to do exactly that, and we'll be working alongside the sector very closely to make that happen.
Do you have a mic?
You can read out the question.
Here we go. It's not far.
Thanks very much. Greg Lowe from Becca, and thank you all for giving us some insight today. Certainly you'll have made a lot of people in the room happy, Prime Minister and Minister Faafoi, around getting some clarity around employment for people coming into New Zealand. We are all seeing people leave. My own daughter's now working in Sydney, and so she's part of that natural exodus of people that want to go off around the world, and we want other people's other young people to come to our country as well. So we'll be pleased to see some clarity around that. I think as I'm going to Australia next week. I was hoping that you were going to remove pre-departure testing a little earlier than the end of July, Prime Minister, so I guess I'll have to just comply with the rules for a little bit longer. My question was actually about education, and so perhaps if I can just press you a little bit more, Minister, for some clarity, and maybe you're trying to save the big announcements for tomorrow, but our young people, of course, choose to do some of their education overseas, as do other young people coming here. International education for the tertiary sector was certainly a big part of their business model, but also in the secondary sector. And so I wonder if you could just give us a bit of insight into how you want to see the international education sector re-establish itself.
Yes, and I will set out a lot more detail on that tomorrow. One of the key messages that you're going to hear from us around international education over the next few months is a much greater emphasis on market diversification. This is something that creates a huge opportunity for New Zealand's international education sector that at the moment is a massive risk. We get the vast majority of our international students from one market. It is a market that there's a lot of uncertainty around at the moment. It's a market that's not reopened to the rest of the world at this point. And so what we want to do is say to the international education sector and to our providers, use this opportunity when you can't go into that market to get out and start exploring other markets and start developing those. So my first travel will be very much focused on that, on some of those emerging markets where there's real potential for New Zealand. We do see international education playing a role throughout our education system. I'll set out more detail about that tomorrow as well, but you can take a big hint from that as to what that is going to be about. And we see real enthusiasm for international exchange, and we think that New Zealand has an incredible story to tell and an incredibly attractive offer for international students around the world. We can go around the world, we can recruit international students, and our COVID-19 response is actually a very good marketing thing for us around the world for international students. Their parents see New Zealand as a very safe place to send their young people, and that can be a huge leverage for us as we re-engage and as we start to really actively recruit international students again.
Greg, could I also wish you well on your trip to Australia, but also just note, pre-departure testing will be, we've indicated today, we anticipate being gone by the end of July when we have that full reopening. That certainly doesn't mean that that is the date it will occur. We anticipate it being removed earlier than that.
Thank you for that. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to take one last question, and then I'm going to get Phil Love up here to give a vote of thanks.
Okay, I'll just try to make mine very quick. I'm Janet Carson. I represent Gas New Zealand, which is New Zealand energy companies that are deeply invested in a renewable gas future. My question actually is not about renewable gas, but I thought I'd get that in anyway. My question is around your comments, Prime Minister, around after the global financial crisis that Māori unemployment was 14%. And I'm really aware that after the GFC, Māori were disproportionately impacted economically against other New Zealanders. And I was just wondering how the strong economy that we are relatively enjoying compared to the rest of the world, what is in the budget that will ensure that Māori are not disproportionately affected again?
Great question. And as you could see from the statistics I shared, that whilst we don't have those same high levels, we do still have a higher rate relative to the general population. And of course, it has been our focus and aspiration as a government to reduce those inequalities in unemployment, as it is our aspiration to reduce those inequalities in education and health on all of those measures that really matter and an indicator of the overall well-being of our society. Whilst I won't speak to the budget specifically, what I can do is just reflect on what we've done today. We do have a specific Māori unemployment focus, as we do also, for instance, for other population groups where we have those inequities, including our migrant populations. But when it comes to Māori, specific programs like He Poutama Rangatahi or even the way that we've rolled out mana and mahi. These have been very specific programs where we've included not just incentives for employers to take new employees on, where we know that there are risk factors that mean that they may, for instance, either come on to government support or linger there longer. They also include wraparound support. I always reflect back on some of the experiences pre my time in this job where I was the employment spokesperson, and I'd spend a bit of time out with employers, asking them the questions around why weren't they taking new trainees on, or potentially taking a bit of a leap into taking on young people, particularly in communities where we had higher unemployment rates. And often it was the cost, the expense and the time. And I saw some really successful programs, one in particular led by the Mayor of Otahonga, where they took on almost a group training approach, where that wraparound support and the role of mentors was critical. We've learned from that and put it into some of these employment programs we're using now, like, for instance, mana and mahi and rangatahi, and they're proving to be really successful. So we've expanded them, continue to roll them out, and those are the kinds of initiatives that we believe are making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Ministers. I'll let you get back to your seats. So now I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Chief Executive of Business New Zealand, Phil Love, who is well known to most of you in his role with the Major Company Group. And I'd just like to acknowledge the work that Phil and Catherine McGee and the Business New Zealand team have done to organise events like this one.
Righto, happy to answer any questions. Oh, look, extremely. I think we're going to make sure that the immigration system gets it back up and running. So we've got the new accredited employer work visa system opening in July. We're going to make sure employers are accredited. It's a new system for them, but we've worked behind the scenes and with sectors to make sure we've got a simple and smart immigration system for them. As we mentioned earlier, we're taking the situation from 6 visas down to 1. We've got a new back office system. We've got more staff. All fingers crossed to make sure it's working on July the 4th. Because obviously, as you've seen here today, a lot of businesses want to make sure they can bring the skills they need into the country.
It's taking months to process student visas and visitor visas. Are you really reopening the door if people actually can't get through it?
No, as I say, we're confident we've got the resources. We've employed about 230 more people to be able to process. We've got a new system to make sure that people can apply online and we can manage those visas behind the scenes much more dynamically. So if there's demand in one area that increases, we can respond to that. In the past, it's been a paper system. So while I think people will have memories of waiting, the ability for us to manage with the new system and having more staff will allow us to be able to get the visitor visas, work visas, and importantly the resident visas done as quickly as possible.
So what will be your expectation for processing time for those visas?
So we've said for the new accredited employer work visa that the job check would take about 20 working days and a migrant check should take about 10 working days. In the old system, that used to take 50 to 60 days. So people will be getting a much better experience because we'll be able to use an online system and be able to manage those workflows better.
So that will take 10 days to process.
So that's the aim. So the migrant check, the visitor visas we've said are 20 working days. Again, that is faster than what we had under the old system.
And you're confident that Immigration New Zealand has the resources it's needed?
We've hired more people and we'll continue to hire more people. We've been challenged just like any other employer to make sure we've got enough people. But the combination of hiring more people and a better online system will help us manage that.
And the Green Party is saying you've now created a two-tiered immigration system because the people the low-wage but essential workers who got us through this pandemic now don't actually get that uplift to come here.
Well, we've given about 190,000 people who have been here for some time and skilled work and scarce jobs ability to apply for residency. We've made no secret that we want to move to a higher wage, higher skill economy, and we're working with the sectors that have traditionally relied on migrants who are paid below the median wage to make sure that if they can transition into that. So in the meantime, they'll have the ability to continue, and we importantly need to make sure that we've got a system that we work with those sectors to train and retain as many and give as many opportunities to New Zealanders. While we have low unemployment now, we need to make sure that we're preparing for a day where that might not be the case, and we need to make sure that we've got systems and agreements with sectors to retain as many New Zealanders as we possibly can.
So why didn't you go full cold turkey, if you like, given the pressure on wages upwards? Why give those industries the chance to employ at lower wages than the median?
Because we've said for a long time that we want to make sure that our economy is not a low wage and low skill economy. We've chosen the median wage as a threshold for higher paid and higher skills, and it will make it easier for employers to have certainty. In the old world, it used to be a long-term shorter school and you have to go through a process of 6 visas. Now we're saying if you're an accredited employer, you're paying the median wage and you can't find someone in New Zealand, then you are able to bring in someone from offshore. We've obviously got demand for skills in New Zealand at the moment. We've got a better streamlined system, so we're able to meet the needs of both business and also government's objectives of making sure that we're lifting the skills of people coming into the country.
So why did you give any concessions at all to those?
Look, because we need a transition. The border is just about to reopen fully. Those sectors that have traditionally relied on migrant labour cannot flick a switch and move to the median wage immediately. We'll work with them to make sure that we can do everything that they can bring in the workers that they need, that they are retaining workers that they need, and they are training New Zealanders to do work that they need. A lot of them are already on that pathway. The likes of the dairy sector have done extremely good work. We'll continue to do that work, and we'll work with them between now and about September this year to make sure that those sector agreements can come to a place where both sides of the equation are happy.
Do you think under these settings we'll still be the country that has the highest proportion of low-wage migrants in the OECD?
Well, what we hope is that we make sure that we lift the skills level of people coming into the country. As the Prime Minister mentioned, I think we're at about 5% in terms of the highest rate of migrants in our workforce in the OECD. We've made no secret that we want to make sure we move to a higher wage, a higher skill economy. So our objective is to lift the level of skills coming into New Zealand. No, if you see the green list, list, there are two pathways there. If you're offered a job and your occupation is on the list, then you have the ability to get residence.
But all the Productivity Commission's work is based on numbers, right? The numbers of people coming to the country.
Yes, and we've got a serious skill shortage at the moment, and respond to that, we've put in place the green list. So if there are jobs available and employers have jobs available that are on the green list, and they go through the process, then they have the ability to come here and get residence.
So how many people do you expect to come and get residency or come as temporary migrants?
Look, it's difficult to put a number on it because we're still watching the post-COVID travel flows. The announcements that we've made today, including the border opening, and that includes visitor visas, I think will increase the number of people over 12 months by about 286,000, I believe. Most of those would be visitor visas. I think would expect about 30,000 under the accredited employer work visa. How many of those might be eligible or want to take up residency depends on who comes and applies.
So we're looking about 100,000 before COVID per year. What would you expect?
No, that's visitor visas. So because we're opening up to non-visa waiver countries, I think that says that we're expecting over that 12 months about another 100,000 visitors over that period.
Right, but I'm just trying to work out, compared to 2019, what do these new settings deliver for temporary workers and residents?
Well, obviously a swifter pathway to residence. Again, we're setting the threshold at the median wage. That is because of the government's aspiration to make sure we've got higher skills, higher wage economy. The businesses that are here today want to make sure that they can fill their skill shortages. If they're paying above the median wage and they're on the green list, then the thing that they have now is to be able to give certainty to those people, that those people can come to New Zealand and they've got a pretty secure pathway to residence.
Minister, you're talking about attracting high-skilled workers to New Zealand. What do you find is low-skilled workers?
Well, I think we've obviously made a threshold of things below the median wage for the accredited employer work visa. Some of those sectors that have traditionally relied on those kinds of work in the dairy sector has been the likes of dairy farm workers. We've got a short-term challenge to make sure that they can continue to get those workers through the sector agreements. But we're also working with them to make sure that they're training people to get into those lower level jobs so they can progress into the likes of dairy farm managers as a particular example, because we don't have the ability to be able to pump those out.
So who then does those jobs?
Well, alongside the AEWV, we'll still have the likes of the tourism sector who have traditionally hired people like working holidays, visa holders, student visa holders to be able to fill their gaps. I think the tourism industry alone, I think, hires about 60% locals and about 40 people who are migrant workers, predominantly on working holiday visas. We've given them another 9 or 10 months to be able to employ at the lower rate, so we can have those types of visa holders, the holiday makers, come back into the country and continue to do that work.
Are you then condemning those sectors to relying on sort of lower wage workers?
No, we are asking those sectors to transition and give more New Zealanders the opportunity for some of that work that has traditionally been taken up by people who have been coming into the country.
And why is it taking a year for this reset?
Well, it's a big piece of work. There's been a hell of a lot of engagement between the time we made the initial speech by Minister Nash and now, and we want to make sure we got all of that right. We have listened to the feedback from a number of sectors, which is why you've got the likes of sector agreements to help them through the transition. and also in particular the tourism and hospitality sector, that we're giving about another 9 or 10 months to make sure that they can let the kinds of migrant workers that they've traditionally had for their roles come into the country.
So why are you cutting the tourism and hospitality areas some slack when our economy seems to grow pretty strong without that tourism or the international students?
Look, they've obviously advocated very hard, and their ability to be able to staff as we reopen the borders is constrained by the ability to be able to hire the likes of working holiday visas, which while have opened, we have not seen large numbers come to the country. We need to give them some time for those types of travellers to come into the country, to staff those jobs, and that's why we've recognised that by giving them till April 2023 to be able to hire below that medium wage level.
So what advice have you got about how much these new settings might depress wage inflation or increase wage inflation?
It's not about depressing, it's about making sure we lift the skills that we have in New Zealand and giving the tools to businesses to be able to give certainty to the people that we want to attract about a long-term future here in New Zealand. If you have a look at the green list, there are about, as the Prime Minister said, about 70 or 80 occupations on there that we desperately need. And we're saying to those skills and those people out there that aren't in New Zealand yet, that if you're on those lists, you either get straight to residence or a two-year pathway, secured pathway to residence. That's the kind of thing that we need to attract those highly skilled people here. A lot of people in this room are demanding at the moment, and all of that will be able to happen as of July the 4th.
So you used to be able to award about 40 to 50,000 residencies per year. What will these new settings give you the space to award?
Look, I think in the next couple of years, those numbers won't necessarily be what we normally see, because the 2021 residence visa would have taken a lot of the demand out of the system. So it depends on the number of people who apply for the roles that on the green list who have a pathway to residence. Again, I think I said earlier on, we're expecting about 30,000 people to be eligible for the AEWV. How many of them will be on the green list is anyone's guess. But I think let me just finish this. I think it's fair to say that there is a lot of demand for skills in New Zealand if you have a conversation to anyone in this room, which is why I think there's probably a lot of relief, that got some certainty about July the 4th, and also that we've given the ability to wave a flag that says New Zealand is a place that you can come to and stay if you're on that green list and your skills are in demand.
Just for clarity, the up-21 visas, is it still your expectation that they'll be processed in 12 months?
So I want them to be done in 12 months as a result of this, to manage some of the processing. I think the goal that we had when we announced that back in October of last year was 80% in 12 months, to make sure that we've got the processing ability to do the visitor visas and the likes of the work visas. That goal will move out by another 6 months, which is not a lot, but again, we want to make sure, my ask of the department is to make sure that they can do it within 12 months.
So it will be now 80% within 18 months?
So that is the longest term I would like it to take. That is a shift of 6 months in order for us to have the processing capacity to do everything else that we've done as a result of today's announcements. I've asked the team to make sure that we also aim for the 12 months 80% mark as well.
Why have you designed a whole new system as opposed to just tweaking things? There's nothing in here.
Because the old system was clunky and didn't work. I think if you were here 2 years ago, a lot of people at this meeting would have said that there are delays and it's complicated. What we've tried to make sure we've got here is a simple and streamlined immigration system. If you want to bring someone in and you're paying the median wage and you've tested the local market, you're a good employer, and the person applying for the job meets all the tests that we ask of migrant workers, you can bring them in. It's that simple.
You could have just tweaked the old system and then not have to retrain.
And there still would have been complaints about it being a complex system. We're trying to make sure that it's as streamlined as possible, and I think the relatively simple process that people and employers will have now will make it much easier for them to understand when they can and cannot bring people into the country.
You can't be certain of the efficiency because you haven't actually used the system before.
Well, that's right. It's a new system and it's a new process, but it's all been designed to make sure it can be smarter and simpler. So how much coming out of RNZ? Look, as I say, we've employed about 230 more people. We're continuing to employ. What I also want you to realise is we've also got a different back office system, which allows people to take what was a very paper-based system to be online. One of the frustrations that people have had in the old system when they applied is that they didn't know where things were. The new system will allow them to be able to look for themselves and find out where in the process their visa is, if it's either at the beginning of the process or at the end, so they can give themselves peace of mind. What it also allows is the case managers to be able to say there's been a pick-up on a particular type of visa which we need to make sure flows through. We can have dynamic management of that. So all of those things coming together hopefully will reflect a simpler and smarter immigration system. So I just want to make sure I share it on. Sorry.
Are you concerned about the minimum wage requirements placed on businesses?
In terms of you mean the median wage? Look, we've been mindful of that, and that's why the sector agreements for those 5 sectors that have traditionally relied on lower paid migrant workers will be worked through between now and the end of the year. They can't transition immediately, so we'll work with those. Obviously, we want to make sure that people can continue to bring staff if they've got staff shortages, but we also want a commitment from them about how they're going to make sure that they're looking at the domestic market, offering better wages and conditions, and also training people to come into some of those roles as well.
And what's the ideal migrant that you would be hoping to attract to New Zealand?
Sorry, I didn't quite.
What's the ideal migrant that you're hoping to attract to New Zealand?
Look, highly skilled. And I think we've been pretty clear that the experience of the past decade, where we started to increase the number of low-paid migrants, wasn't working out for the economy or the migrants themselves. There was increased worker exploitation that we had to take measures to make sure we could deal with. So, we've set the threshold of the median wage, made it very simple for employers to understand, and the aspiration there is to be able to use that and the green list to be able to attract more people here now that the borders are opened.
One more question for Minister Faafoi.
Yeah.
One more.
Okay, sorry.
Minister, last question about temporary migrants who are stuck overseas. Around 20,000 temporary migrants will still remain stuck overseas since March 2020. Would you consider reinstating their expired visas?
Not at this stage. Once the border reopens, once the border reopens on July the 31st, they'll be able to apply for new visas.
But what is the rationale? Like countries like Australia, they have allowed and they are only...
We have taken a decision to make sure that when we open the border, that those who have expired will have the ability to apply for a new visa.
I was happy for him to do all the questions.
Why not drop the pre-departure requirement now if you're just going to drop it anyway?
At the moment, pre-departure testing is the main thing that stands between New Zealand's population at large and any potential new variants of COVID-19 that might emerge around the world. We have got a variant plan that we're consulting on that ultimately aims to remove those kind of restrictions, but we have to have a plan for dealing with new variants when they do emerge around the world. At the moment, pre-departure testing is still playing a role there.
So you are keeping pre-departure testing because the variant plan isn't quite ready to go yet?
It's about making sure that as new variants emerge, New Zealand's ready to respond to those.
So yes, if that variant plan were ready, we would no longer need pre-departure testing.
There is a relationship between those two things.
How did you get to that date of July 31st? Why not earlier? Why not keep it October? Where did that come from?
Ultimately, if you look at the announcements that we've just made, there are a whole lot of different moving parts that we needed to line up in order to get a series of dates that works, that we can deliver on, and that's exactly what we've done.
Something like cruise ships, that Australians include us on that, why not bring that?
There's no cruise ships wanting to come to New Zealand until October. So a 31st of July date means that we're absolutely giving them certainty well before they're planning to come. Cruise ships don't just change course mid-sailing. That does require a bit of planning. So there wouldn't be any ships, even if we opened as of today, there wouldn't be any ships coming between now and the 31st of July.
And just on the 7-day household contact, 7-day isolation, which your boss will be very when are we going to scrap that? There's so many other countries that.
Look, we keep it under review. Those other countries who have scrapped it have often seen a significant increase in case numbers as they've changed up their home isolation requirements. And we're on the downward trajectory at the moment. We want to stay on the downward trajectory for as long as we can.
And there are also, so many people are actually just ignoring that requirement, and it's putting additional pressure on businesses. Why not just drop it?
Because at the moment it's playing a role in suppressing the rate of infection that we're seeing in New Zealand.
you say we're on the downward trajectory, but in Auckland it sort of seems like you might be going on the up. Is that concerning in terms of the airport being right here?
Yeah, early days. I mean, it is possible that, and we've always been really clear with New Zealanders that we may well see another peak as we head into winter, and the weather's changing, things are changing. There's a reasonable period of time between some of those early infections and now, so we could well see another peak.
July 31 would be right in the middle of winter.
Yeah, the international border isn't playing a huge role in the number of cases that we're seeing in the community.
Can you just run through what is the process of the system for detecting new variants at the border? What is that going to be long-term? Random testing?
So even after pre-departure testing is removed, we're still likely for a period of time to continue with on-arrival testing. At the moment we do that by giving people rapid antigen tests to take away with them and test once they've arrived in New Zealand. And then we follow up positive tests with positive rapid antigen tests that are related to the border with PCR tests, which is the ones that we can use for whole genome sequencing.
That's mandatory.
And we haven't agreed on what the settings are ultimately going to be there, and that's one of the things that we'll provide certainty around. But it does mean that the whole genome sequencing we're doing of border cases is allowing us to pick up new variants as they arrive in New Zealand at around the same timeframes as other countries are picking them up.
On international education,
yeah.
Do you expect the sector to go back onto the old growth trajectory, the sort of Stephen Joyce doubling idea, or are we looking at a different type of international education sector now?
The international education strategy that we launched pre-COVID-19 as a relatively new government was about focusing on value rather than volume, and value not just in economic terms, but actually in terms of it's good for New Zealand to have international students coming into the country. It adds a huge diversity and richness to our education system that we benefit from. It helps New Zealand to create international relationships around the world that can be sustained for generations. And so there is huge value in international education that's non-monetary. And so the international education strategy we set out 3.5 years ago is very much where we want the emphasis to be. So it's not about just a race to see how many international students we can get into the country. It's about making sure that there's value on both sides of our international education relationships.
Because in the past it's often been just a way to sell a residency and get in a cheap student worker who can sleep on a couch in Te Puke.
Yeah, and you'll see from the announcements that we've made today, over the last 3 years, we have been working really hard to stop that type of approach. International agents, education agents, shouldn't be out there recruiting international students on the basis that this is an easy way to get into New Zealand. It's not, and that pathway is being closed off. Ultimately, though, that's not to say that there isn't a pathway for international students to settle in New Zealand, but that shouldn't be the reason that they are coming here in the first place.
Will you require offshore international education agents to be licensed?
We haven't got a plan around that at the moment, no.
So they could sell whatever they wanted to students on the way in.
Well, ultimately they still have to have visas, though. So.
We've got it as well.
Yeah, we've got it. Yeah.
Just on booster shots with winter coming up. So obviously, will the second booster be for high-risk people as opposed to the general population?
As I've indicated before, and we should make announcements on this in the next few weeks, we do expect that additional booster doses will be available to New Zealanders. It's unlikely that it's going to be available just across the board. It is more likely to be targeted at those who are older and those who have underlying health reasons for getting that additional booster. But look, the final decisions on that haven't been made yet. They will be made in the next few weeks, and then we'll have information about timing and so on.
But has the government been held up in this rollout because of the legislative change that's required with Pfizer not making an application?
That is one of the things that we're working our way through at the moment. Because Pfizer have not applied for a fourth dose, we have to make sure that we are finding a robust legal avenue for fourth doses.
Just on, I think
Last one.
You dropped the anything that you have to have a degree level now to come to New Zealand under the international students. Have you dropped anything less than shorter than a degree?
No, this is about post-study work rights, where the change has taken place. So international students are still welcome, right the way through the education system. The visas processing is getting underway. But for those post-study work rights, there are limitations there around if you're below degree level, the post-study work rights are restricted to those who are in areas of skill shortage.
I can send you a fact sheet.
Yeah.
Some data.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Sorry.
everyone.